Welcome to today's deep dive. If you're an intellectually curious learner, someone who just wants to make sense of all the noise out there, you are in exactly the right place.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a fascinating one today.
Because today we are looking at the United Kingdom, and we're setting the scene in March 2026.
Right.
The economy is, well, it's teetering on the edge of a recession. The cost of living is just suffocating people. And a leaked political blueprint has just proposed an idea that is so radical it hasn't been taken this seriously by a British government in over a century.
Over 100 years. I mean, it's a blueprint that fundamentally challenges how modern economies even operate.
It really does. And that is exactly what we're exploring today, looking through the lens of a highly provocative essay. It's by Peter Smith, and it's titled The Land They Forgot, a Georgist reckoning with the Beveridge Report.
Catchy title, honestly.
Right. And according to Smith, this rumored Labour Party strategy, which is being dubbed the Beveridge Report for the economy, proposes abolishing national insurance entirely, just gone, and replacing it with a tax on landowners.
Which would completely, totally invert the traditional tax structure of the UK.
It's massive. So our mission today is to really unpack the historical and economic mechanics of a land value tax, or LVT, exactly as Smith outlines it. But before we get into the gears of how this actually works, we need to lay down a very clear boundary for this discussion.
Yeah, that's crucial here.
Because Smith's essay touches on highly charged, extremely current UK politics. I mean, he critiques both Labour and Conservative governments, specific politicians, entrenched class wealth, you name it.
Yeah.
So we are remaining entirely neutral today.
Exactly. We're just looking at the architecture of his argument, nothing more.
Precisely. We are not endorsing Peter Smith's political views. We're not attacking anyone's policies. We are purely acting as impartial guides to help you, the listener, understand this deeply fascinating economic framework.
Right, because to understand that framework, we really have to look at the exact political reality Smith is describing in March 2026.
Yeah, paint that picture for us.
So Keir Starmer's poll ratings are, in the essay's words, catastrophic.
Yeah. Officially, the Office for Budget Responsibility, the OBR, is predicting this sluggish 1.5% GDP growth. But Smith claims that deep inside Whitehall, they're actually hiding the likelihood of a devastating recession.
And honestly, you don't even need internal memos to see the reality on the street. I mean, Smith points to everyday horrors, like a working family paying £2,000 a month in rent for a one-bedroom flat where the bedroom literally has to double as the sitting room.
It's just relentless. The squeeze on ordinary people is everywhere.
Which totally explains why this leaked paper made such waves. It was produced by the Labour Growth Group and the Good Growth Foundation, and apparently it engaged advisors to major political figures. We're talking Wes Streeting, Angela Rayner, Andy Burnham.
Heavy hitters.
Right. And the director of the Growth Group, Mark McVitie, basically admitted that merely diagnosing the cost of living crisis just isn't enough anymore.
You actually have to treat it.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this, because Smith uses a brilliant analogy here to explain McVitie's frustration.
Oh, the doctor analogy. I love this part. It's so good. He says, imagine you go to a doctor, right?
Yeah.
The doctor sympathetically diagnoses your illness, tells you how much he cares about your pain, but then prescribes the exact same aspirin that has failed to cure you for 80 years.
Right.
Smith argues that's not a good doctor, that's a politician. The UK economy is hemorrhaging, and it needs major surgery, not more aspirin.
And the surgery Smith is advocating for is this radical shift, basically removing the tax burden from human labor entirely and placing it completely onto land value.
But to understand why he views taxing land as the only viable cure, we have to look at that original 80-year-old aspirin.
We have to go back to the rubble of 1942.
The winter of 1942. The Blitz has just battered Britain. And this highly ambitious civil servant named Sir William Beveridge presents a plan to a very desperate, hopeful nation.
Right, which becomes the famous 1942 Beveridge Report. And his goal was monumental. He wanted to slay what he called the five giants.
Right. Want, disease, ignorance, squalor, and idleness.
Exactly. And it was a massive cultural phenomenon. It sold, 635,000 copies?
Yeah, the Royal Air Force was actually dropping translated versions of it behind enemy lines as propaganda.
Yeah.
Essentially saying, look at the compassionate post-war democracy we are building.
Which is incredible, and it laid the absolute foundation for the modern welfare state, including the NHS.
Right. Yet despite all that undeniable good, Peter Smith looks back at the Beveridge Report and he calls it a magnificent, elaborately constructed fraud.
Which is a bold claim.
It's a huge claim. And I have to push back on that a bit, though, because the essay itself acknowledges that Beveridge created a universal, contributory, non-means-tested welfare system. And he did that deliberately to avoid the humiliation of the old poor law.
Right.
He realized that means testing actually traps people in poverty because the moment they earn a little more, their benefits vanish. That sounds incredibly progressive to me. So why is that so fiercely critical of this architecture?
Well, what's fascinating here is what Smith terms the perverse architecture of labor taxation. So Beveridge correctly identified symptoms, right? Want, squalor. But Smith argues he was completely blind to the root cause, which is land monopoly.
Okay, walk me through that.
Think about how Beveridge funded his beautiful new welfare state. He taxed human effort. He created national insurance. Employers paid for the right to hire, and employees paid for the right to work.
Meanwhile, the physical ground beneath their feet, the land, was left virtually untaxed.
Exactly. And that omission, according to Smith, created a fatal economic flaw. He argues that by doing this, Beveridge was essentially taxing the victim to compensate the victim.
How so?
Well, if you give working people welfare benefits or higher wages, but you leave landlords with unchecked power over a scarce necessity, like housing the landlords just absorb the welfare state.
Oh, I see. They just raise the rents.
Yes. Rent inevitably rises to consume any surplus above bare subsistence.
So any extra money a worker gets from the state, or even just a raise at work, just gets swallowed up by their next lease renewal.
Exactly. And Smith points to a modern consequence of this. He highlights the £22 billion the UK spends annually on tax credits today.
Wow.
The government is literally subsidizing the rent of full-time working people because their wages are just devoured by housing costs.
That is a staggering way to frame it. Beveridge built a welfare state, and the landlords essentially ate it.
Yeah, that's exactly his point. Because the 1942 report only treated the symptoms, Smith argues we need a completely new report today, a Georgist reconstruction.
Right, and this framework is named after Henry George. He's an American political economist who wrote this wildly influential book called Progress and Poverty back in 1879.
Yeah, and Smith also points to Thomas Paine from 1797.
Yeah, and the core Georgist principle here is that the landlord, strictly in their capacity as a landowner, contributes absolutely nothing to the economy. The community builds the surrounding infrastructure, but the landlord captures the resulting financial value.
Right, but let's pause right there and define a term Smith uses heavily to describe this dynamic. He calls them the rentier.
Good point, because I think most people hear the word rent and just think of, the monthly check they send to their landlord for their apartment.
Yeah, it's a vital distinction. In economics, a rentier isn't necessarily just a landlord. A rentier is anyone who leverages their ownership of a scarce, monopolized asset to extract wealth from the economy without actually producing anything new or useful.
They're just extracting economic rent. It's unearned income.
Exactly. And when a society is structured to reward rentiers instead of workers, you get what Smith calls the new giants of the modern economy.
Right, replacing Beveridge's old giants.
Right. So new giant number one is the rentier economy itself. And he illustrates this with a frankly mind-boggling statistic. Between 1995 and 2022, the value of land in the UK exploded from roughly $1 trillion to over $5 trillion.
Wait, really? $5 trillion?
Yes. And that £4 trillion increase wasn't created by landlords magically making the dirt better. It is purely the capitalized value of the location.
So the proposed Georgist remedy is a land value tax, or LVT. But the mechanism of how this is calculated is crucial. LVT is assessed only on the unimproved value of the land.
It completely ignores any buildings or improvements you put on it.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Just picture this for a second, right? Imagine you own a vacant dirt lot in a city. You don't build anything, you just let the weeds grow.
Okay.
Then, the city decides to build a brand new subway stop right next to your lot. Because of the transit, coffee shops open, a business district pops up, and overnight, your patch of dirt is worth millions of pounds.
And you did nothing.
You contributed nothing to the subway or the local culture. So the LVT is designed to tax that specific location value, the value the community created.
And conversely, if you decide to build a massive, beautiful, energy-efficient apartment building on your lot, the LVT does not tax the building.
It only taxes the underlying dirt.
Exactly. So you aren't punished for developing the land. Smith notes that Nobel laureates like Joseph Stiglitz and Paul Samuelson mathematically proved this is the optimal tax.
Because you can't hide a plot of land in an offshore bank account.
Right. And taxing it doesn't discourage people from working or building. That underlying logic really explains how this wealth extraction functions on a macroeconomic level. Which brings us to Smith's new giant number two.
The land credit cycle.
Yeah, because that unearned land value doesn't just sit in a vacuum. It aggressively drives the entire economy's boom and bust cycle. Economists Fred Harrison and Josh Ryan Collins have actually mapped out this remorseless 18-year property cycle.
So how does that cycle actually work in practice? Like mechanically?
It's a dangerous feedback loop between land and banks.
Yeah.
Right now, about 70% of UK bank collateral is tied up in real estate.
Wow, 70%.
Yeah. So when banks see land values rising, they are eager to lend more money against it. So a buyer gets a larger mortgage, which allows them to bid higher for a property.
Which pushes the land prices up even further.
Exactly. Which makes the bank's collateral look even better, so they lend even more money.
They're essentially pumping billions into a speculative bubble. They're converting community-created land value into private bank debt.
Precisely. And they keep inflating that bubble until it bursts under its own weight, which is exactly what caused the 2008 financial crash. It was driven by massive mortgage credit expansion tied to land speculation.
Okay, so if the LVT replaces all these other taxes, how does it interrupt that specific loop? Does it just make borrowing harder?
It alters the foundational incentive. LVT acts as an automatic economic stabilizer.
Okay.
If the rental value of land is taxed annually, the incentive to buy a vacant lot and just wait for the price to go up completely vanishes.
Oh, because the tax captures that speculative premium.
Right. Land prices stabilize at their actual productive value, meaning banks no longer have this ever-inflating bubble to lend against. The cycle is broken.
And when banks are busy pumping billions into this speculative land credit cycle, that money isn't going toward actually building things, which directly results in the physical reality of our cities and Smith's third giant, the housing crisis.
Yeah. The UK has been locked in this bitter, decades-long argument about housing shortages. The conventional wisdom usually blames town planning or zoning regulations, red tape, but Smith insists it is fundamentally a land hoarding problem.
Right. He targets the major house builders. He points out that they sit on massive land banks. We're talking hundreds of thousands of plots that already have planning permission.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't a builder just build on them immediately?
Because restricting supply maximizes their profit margins. Think about it. If a developer floods the market with 10,000 homes all at once, the price drops.
Basic supply and demand.
Exactly. But if they drip feed those plots onto the market slowly, while the underlying land continues to appreciate in value because of the bank loop we just talked about, they make far more money.
But under a land value tax, hoarding becomes financially ruinous.
Utterly ruinous.
Because if you own an empty lot zoned for 500 homes, the LVT charges you the exact same hefty tax, whether you build the homes or leave it as dirt. The tax is based on its potential use. So your only logical options are to build the homes immediately, to generate income to pay the tax, or sell the land to someone who will.
It literally forces idle land into productive use. And when you finally fix the housing supply, you naturally alleviate new giant number 4.
In-work poverty.
Exactly. If we brought William Beveridge to 2026, Smith suggests his greatest horror wouldn't be poverty itself, but the reality that people are working punishingly hard full-time jobs and they still require state housing benefits to survive.
Because the rentier economy extracts their wages first.
Yes.
So what does this all mean in terms of government revenue? Because according to Smith, an LVT would raise an estimated $180 billion to $250 billion annually.
That's a massive number.
Right. And he proposes using this to abolish income tax on the first 20,000 pounds of earnings, plus wiping out national insurance, stamp duty, council tax, and business rates. But even after all that, there's a surplus.
Yeah, there's money left over.
So where does the rest of the money go? Does the state just absorb it for, new programs?
This is where Smith's proposal makes a really profound philosophical leap.
Yeah.
He introduces the citizen's dividend.
Okay.
It is a universal, unconditional payment given to every single adult resident. But we have to be incredibly precise here, because Smith argues this is fundamentally different from a standard universal basic income.
Wait, how is that different? I mean, whether you call it a basic income or a dividend, isn't the government still just cutting a check to citizens?
The difference lies in where the money comes from and who rightfully owns it.
Okay, unpack that.
A traditional universal basic income is usually funded by taxing labor or corporate profits. You're taking a cut of someone else's hard work to redistribute it. Smith argues that the citizen's dividend is not a handout. It is the rightful distribution of a shared asset.
Because the community created the land value in the first place.
Exactly. The revenue from the LVT belongs to the citizens as their inheritance. Think of how the state of Alaska manages its oil wealth.
Ooh.
They don't just let private companies take all the oil for free. They tax the extraction of that shared natural resource, and they pay every Alaskan resident an annual dividend. Smith applies that exact same logic to the land under our feet.
That's brilliant. You aren't getting charity. You are receiving your shareholder dividend simply for living in and contributing to the community.
Right.
That is a radically different way to view citizenship. And this concept of a rightful distribution of a shared asset doesn't just stop at physical dirt. Once you grasp the logic of taxing unearned monopolies, you can apply it to invisible assets too,
Yeah.
which is what Smith tackles with new giant number 5.
Environmental rent.
Yes.
Smith wants to expand this Georgist principle to encompass all forms of commonwealth. We usually think of landlords enclosing land, but modern rentiers enclose all sorts of public assets. Take the atmosphere, for example.
Right. Right now, corporations just pump carbon emissions into the air for free.
Exactly. They are imposing long-term costs on the entire globe while extracting short-term private profits from fossil fuels.
Or look at the electromagnetic spectrum used by telecom companies. Or pharmaceutical patents.
Patents are a perfect example. A patent is essentially an artificial fence around an idea, often built on decades of publicly funded university research.
Right. The pharmaceutical company didn't invent the fundamental science, but they get a monopoly on the final drug and charge astronomical prices for it.
Even tech monopolies fit this pattern. Just like a landlord captures the value of a subway station they didn't build, a tech platform captures the value of the data generated by billions of users simply interacting with each other.
Wow. The tech platform is just the empty lot. We, the users, generate the actual location value.
It's crazy to think about it that way. So the remedy for all these new giants is applying that same Georgist logic, implementing carbon dividends where polluters pay the true social cost of emissions and the revenue is returned to citizens.
Or conducting proper spectrum auctions, reforming patent monopolies, even instituting a tech data dividend.
Yeah, as Smith concisely puts it, what the community creates, the community owns. What the individual creates, the individual keeps.
It is a beautifully cohesive theory. I mean, the logic just clicks together. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it brings us to the ultimate, rather chilling question posed by the essay. Are they brave enough?
Will any politician actually do this?
Exactly.
And history suggests that landed interests do not surrender their wealth quietly. They fight back with immense, multi-generational resources and political influence. Smith outlines a century of political casualties on this exact issue.
Yeah, I mean, back in 1909, Lloyd George introduced a land tax in his people's budget. And the House of Lords, who literally were the landlords at the time, they gutted it, and it was eventually repealed.
Winston Churchill was famously a huge champion of the land value tax, too. He delivered some of his most brilliant, scathing speeches against land monopolies, yet he completely abandoned the policy when the political winds changed.
Even the ambitious post-war planners tried. They introduced a development charge in 1947 to capture land value, and it was swiftly abolished by the next government. The status quo is deeply, deeply entrenched.
It is, and Smith makes a compelling case that theoretically LVT is economically bulletproof. The math works, the incentives align, the Nobel laureates agree, but as he notes, politically, it is terrifying to those who hold power.
He ends his essay with a really powerful summary of his position. What the community creates, the community owns. What the individual creates, the individual keeps. Tax the land, free the people.
It is a sweeping vision for the future. He is asking us to evolve from the well-intentioned but fundamentally flawed sticking plasters of 1942, which inadvertently ended up subsidizing the rentier class, to a precise 2026 Georgist scalpel.
Right, a scalpel designed to surgically remove the absolute root cause of economic stagnation, the untaxed hoarding of community-created wealth.
It certainly reframes everything you think you know about taxation and fairness.
It really does. And again, just a quick reminder for you listening that this deep dive was an exploration of Peter Smith's highly provocative economic architecture. We are sharing the mechanics of his framework, not offering a political endorsement.
Right. Our goal is simply to give you the context you need to understand what is being debated in those leaked 2026 Whitehall documents.
Exactly. And it's an argument that demands rigorous critical thinking, regardless of where you might sit on the political spectrum.
Absolutely.
So we will leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. Think about your own neighborhood. Picture the streets you walk down. If the true monetary value of the land beneath your feet is actually generated by the vibrant community around it, the local culture, the people, the safe streets, the bustling coffee shops you frequent, how much of your own daily life, your mere existence in your community, is quietly generating wealth that a distant landlord is currently collecting.
Wow. It forces you to look at the world around you with fresh eyes.
It really does. Makes you look at the pavement a little differently. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.